Absolutely. Thanks, Dave. My name's Karen Halliday. I'm a human resources consultant and I work for BBSI. I've been here for about 4 years. BBSI is a professional employers organization. So we help small to medium businesses with their human resources, their payroll, their risk. We have workers' comp. We do strategic business planning. So I'd say there's a lot of PEOs out there. The difference between BBSI and other PEOs is you have a designated team that are right there with you. You have our cell phone numbers, so we support you differently. We're not 1-800. We're right there as part of your team. So I have been in human resources for 25 plus years. I've worked for companies such as Home Depot, 7-Eleven, Taco Bell, and like I said, the most recent with BBSI, and I've been here for about 4 years, and I love it. I love what I do. I love supporting small to medium business owners and clients and helping them build the foundation that they need to grow. So today, we're going to talk about anti-harassment, discrimination, and respect in the workplace. And of course, with that, sexual harassment is the big one, and we're going to discuss that as well. So that I'm not just talking for the next little bit, I'm going to ask that everybody participate. I'm going to ask questions. And so unmute and be ready to answer when I ask questions, so we're not just listening to me. That would be great. And if you have questions, let me know what those are as we go too, please. So I want to start off with respect. Respect, how important that is. Without appreciation and respect for other people, true leadership becomes ineffective, if not impossible. That's a quote by George Foreman. We could spend this whole time just talking about respect and truly making people feel valued and appreciated, and how that relates to their performance and motivates them to be your best employee. So respect is huge, and everything we talk about today is based on respect. It's also based on trust, because trust is part of building that respect. So I want to ask, here's the first question. So please be ready. Why is trust important in the workplace? Why does it even matter that we build relationships with trust?
I'll just try answering it.
Okay.
Without trust, I think a lot of issues will come your way. I think if you start a relationship off not trusting somebody, it gives off negativity. It also makes people feel like they can't trust you if you can't trust them. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. And any relationship that we build, whether it's in the workplace, in our families, with friends, it has to be founded on trust. That has to be the founding of any relationship. And really building trust, how do we do that in the workplace? By getting to know each other, by showing appreciation, by having each other's backs, and then trusting in people's good intentions. And trust can be so easily destroyed in the workplace by not holding our end of a commitment, by not showing up, by gossiping, by not being confidential, by judging, throwing people under the bus, can destroy trust and destroy culture so quickly. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, I just had to throw this in here. It's a great time to be talking about this. So many things are going on in our country. We're at a political unrest. We have the Democrat versus Republican. We have the, do you believe in vaccinations? Do you not believe in vaccinations? The last couple of years, we've had so many things going on. We have Black Lives Matters, which has been around for a long time, but is more, got a lot of attention this last year, or actually 2020 and 2021. But truly it's just really our nation's become divided, and we've lost that lack of respect and trust for one another. So it's really an important time to be talking about these things and how they impact us in the workplace. Unconscious bias, all of us have heard about that. It's an automatic mental shortcut that we use to process information and make decisions quickly. How many of you have seen The Voice? I'm sure everybody on this call has maybe at least heard of The Voice. And the chairs are turned around, and they're turned around for a reason, so that the judges can't be biased. They can't have unconscious bias when they're deciding whether somebody has a singing talent or not. So again, our brains are wired to make unconscious biases and decisions based on that. And it's in our DNA, deep rooted. Back when we were cavemen and women, we had to figure out whether somebody was friend or foe within a second, or we would die. So it's very deep rooted. So some examples would be visual. When you see somebody, obviously you see a gender, you see the age, you see the clothes that they're wearing, and make decisions based off of that, their race, their height. Do they have tattoos? Are you pro tattoo, or are you a different generation? Are they overweight? Does that make you assess them differently? Are they beautiful? Are they not beautiful? Do they have a disability? So all kinds of things we're judging people on before we know anything about them. And we also, the auditory, whether somebody has an accent, or they have a high or a low voice, or maybe they have a speech impediment. We make judgments based off of that. Back in the 1950s, major orchestras only had about 6% of female musicians that performed with them. And so the conductors and the managers of these famous orchestras, they wanted to also include women, because they knew that women had talent, but they just couldn't get women to make it through the tryouts. And so what they did is they kind of changed their auditions a little bit, and they had their chairs turned so they couldn't see the person that was auditioning. Well, it didn't work at first, because you'd hear this click clack of high heels walking into the room to audition. And so they realized that they were a female, and there was an unconscious bias that females are not as great as musicians, and they had families to raise, and they just couldn't cut it. So what they did is they had women take their shoes off. They had everyone take their shoes off for an audition, so you couldn't tell whether a woman was walking in or not. Well, it was interesting that the female participation in these major orchestras increased up to 30% fairly quickly. So just by doing that. So it just shows unconscious bias. As an example, studies show that 65% of male CEOs are over 6 feet tall. So are politicians. So are people in leadership positions as far as politics go. Black sounding names, they get less callbacks on resumes. So why does any of this matter? Why does it matter in the workplace with what all of us are doing? We really need to recognize that we all do have biases, and we have blind spots, and we need to talk about how we can avoid those. So really, it's a good idea to question yourself. Question yourself and be willing to have conversations with people that are different than you are. And it can really help you grow and enrich the people that you are employing. Along with this, we also have microaggressions. Microaggressions, I'm sure everyone's heard of this, they are subtle but harmful actions directed at targeted groups. Microaggressions may be verbal, behavioral, or environmental. Those targeted may include people of color, females, those with disabilities, religious minorities, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. So microaggressions basically are insults. So some examples would be maybe to a Black person, they hear things like, "You talk differently than most Black people I know." Somebody that's gay, "Oh, you're gay? I have a friend that's gay. I should introduce you." Like the gay person that you know can't find their own friends. And that's the first thing that you're seeing. Or things like, "Oh, the way you've overcome your disability is so inspiring." To say that to a person with a disability tells you that you're seeing their disability first. See them as a person first, and what they're capable of doing and who they are. Where are you actually from? I work with a gentleman who's Asian, and he's from West Jordan, Utah, but he gets asked all the time, "No, where are you really from?" "Well, I'm from West Jordan, Utah." Not too exciting. So microaggressions, they're brief but damaging. So one might not get you, but it's kind of like a paper cut. You get one paper cut, it's kind of annoying, but if you get thousands of paper cuts, you're in a lot of pain. So something to think about with microaggressions and the way that, do you insult people? Do you have microaggressions? It's a good idea to build those relationships with people and find out, to make sure everybody feels included. So why does this matter? Is this a legal issue? Well, it absolutely is a legal issue. Many of you have heard about the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. I will refer to it as the EEOC because that's a lot to say. Well, they protect employees from discrimination because of their membership in a protected class. So if an employee files a complaint with the EEOC, then it puts them into a protected class, or it puts them into a class where you really can't do anything against them while they're going through the complaint process, or if somebody's part of a complaint process and they're not the one that actually brought it to the attention of the EEOC. So I mentioned protected classes. What are they? So this is where I'm going to ask for your participation again. Give me some examples of protected classes that are of people that are protected by law. Can you guys give me some examples?
Native Americans.
Okay, that's a good one. Native American would be a protected class. Yes. What else? Okay, I'll help us out. So race is a protected class. Race would be the characteristics of somebody, like maybe they have brown eyes or the shape of their eyes or the color of their skin. So somebody could be Chinese but have never been to China, but their race is Chinese. National origin, this is where somebody is from. Color just has to do with the pigmentation in your skin. That's color. Religion's a protected class. It's interesting to me that 1% of the population is Muslim, but Muslims file, it's like 68% of all religious discrimination claims come from the Muslim religion. The biggest reason is Muslims need to pray 5 times daily. That's one thing. And so it's pretty easy to make an accommodation for that that's reasonable. During maybe an 8 to 5 shift, they might have to pray twice. It doesn't take long, and it's really not a disruption. And they may have to wear a headscarf or have a beard, something like that. So easy to make accommodations. I can think when I worked at Home Depot, I had one of the department heads over painting was Pentecostal and she had to wear a skirt. So very reasonable accommodation to make that. She wore a skirt. She didn't climb a ladder. I mean, there are some things you had to make sure she was good with. Age. So what do you think the age is that's in a protected class?
Elderly.
Elderly, it's really not. It's over the age of 40 when it becomes a protected class. And I remember I used to work in human resources for Blockbuster, for those of you that remember Blockbuster. And the managers would say, I don't want to hire somebody that's old, over the age of 40. They'll try to rewind my DVDs. So it's kind of silly. And then there's sex. So sex is basically male or female. And any sex. There's other sexes now as well that are in there. Sexual orientation, pregnancy discrimination. So we can't discriminate against somebody because they're pregnant. We want to treat that like we would any other, like a medical problem, like say somebody broke a leg or something like that. Then we would look at pregnancy kind of the same way. It's just a temporary condition. Eventually you're going to have the baby, or they're going to have the baby. And so we'd want to really look at it like that. And this has to do with not only once we've employed somebody, but when they're in the process of applying for a position with us too. Disability. So when you think of a disability, remember that somebody still has to be able to do the job, but it's with or without a reasonable accommodation. There's all kinds of reasonable accommodations that can be made for a lot of different disabilities. I always think of somebody with diabetes. That's a disability. They might have to test their blood sugar a couple of times a day. They might have to get a snack. They might have to get some insulin, things like that. Military status. So we can't discriminate against somebody that's in the military. So if somebody joins the military, we have to offer them a leave of absence, and that can be for up to 5 years. And then we also need to consider that they might need weekends off if somebody's not in active duty and they're just doing weekend training or weekend drills. So that's a protected class. And then there's also genetic information. What this means is if I find out somebody has like maybe heart disease in their family, and I decide not to employ them because I don't want to deal with that on my insurance, that's where you could get in trouble with that one. So that's a protected class as well. Questions before I move on? A lot of protected classes. Every one of us is in a protected class in some way or another. So employee lawsuits are very expensive. An average out-of-court settlement is about $40,000. That's out of court. That's when you mediate before you ever even get to court. 10% of wrongful termination and discrimination cases result in a $1 million lawsuit or settlement. And 67% of cases are ruled in the plaintiff's favor when taken to litigation. So if you ever do find yourself with a charge from the EEOC, just remember that 67% of cases are ruled in the plaintiff's favor if they're taken to litigation, plus they're very expensive to fight. And then there's retaliation. And I bring this up just because many lawsuits have retaliation. Retaliation can cause more damage to a company than any other charge because there's no cap. It's carte blanche. It's a blank check. So examples of retaliating against somebody is, say that somebody told you that they were being treated inappropriately, maybe touched, or maybe somebody was telling them lewd jokes that they didn't appreciate. And if you change their shift and not the other person's, or cut their hours so they're not working with that person, that's an example of retaliation. Not promoting somebody, firing somebody, changing their job duties, even having their coworkers shun them or ignore them because they know that they'd had an issue with somebody is a form of retaliation. So we have to be really careful with that. So I have some case in points. These are all recent EEOC charges that I was able to find. I get emails every week from the EEOC on recent charges, and these are some recent charges. So this is the Red Rock Western Jeep Tours. They settled a discrimination case for $35,000. And I have some different examples because we talked about the protected classes. And so this case right here had to do with age. So Red Rock hired a lady by the name of Gloria Rose as a reservationist. They gave her her new hire paperwork and told her to fill it out and to bring it back the next day. Well, when she brought it back the next day, her supervisor, that was going to be her supervisor, asked her, "How old are you?" And she said, "Oh, I'm 75. And he said, "Oh, wow, okay." And they sent her on her way, and they never did contact her for her first day, let her know when her first day was. So she sent an email and she said, "When is my first day?" And they said, "Well, we've decided that you're not a good fit." And so she sent an email back saying, "I feel like you're discriminating against me because of my age." So then they felt uncomfortable and they did bring her on. They brought her on for 2 days, gave her no training, and then just let her know at the end of the 2 days that she wasn't the right fit. So simple case, and it was $35,000 that it cost this small company in Arizona. Here's a big one. I wanted to give some different examples, like I said. So this is UPS, and they're to pay $4.9 million, or they did pay $4.9 million to settle a religious discrimination suit. So UPS prohibited male employees to have a supervisory or customer contact position, including delivery drivers. These employees were the ones with beards, Muslim employees that wore beards or that had their hair below collar length. So they failed to hire or promote those with the religious practice of having the beards and the longer hair as part of their religion. So it also segregated employees who maintained the beards or long hair. in accordance with their religious belief into the back of facility positions without any customer contact. So under the terms of the decree that was imposed on them, they have to pay 4.9 million, or they did pay already, and they have to show that they're doing training to their supervisors, human resources personnel, and then they have to publicize how they're doing on their diversity and inclusion. So that's a big one, 4.9 million. This one, it's a smaller company, but I thought it really had to do with this group here. Well, it's not small, it's a big company, but it's smaller than UPS. So the EEOC sues Focus Companies group in Nevada for sexual harassment and retaliation. So Focus they do plumbing, electrical, concrete, framing, fire protection. Their headquarters in Las Vegas. So what happened here was there was monolingual Hispanic women, so women that only spoke Spanish. They were subjected to unwanted grabbing, threats of violence, and other harassing acts. So it's been going on since at least 2017, and EEOC alleges that Focus allowed a class of female workers to be subjected to sexual harassment by male supervisors and co-workers at various construction sites in the Las Vegas area. The sexual harassment included forcible kissing, unwanted grabbing and groping of arms, legs, buttocks, and breasts, and forcible touching of a man's genitalia. The women were also subjected to sexually offensive and vulgar language, lewd facial expressions, and threats of violence if they did not acquiesce to the harassment. And those that complained were ignored and just forced to quit. So this one is still in litigation and it hasn't settled yet, but it will probably settle for quite a bit of money. Okay, I think I just have one or two more. Here's an example. This is a CCC group. They're a construction company in upstate New York. And this had to do with racial harassment. So it was alleged that white supervisors and employees regularly made unwelcome racist comments to Black employees, including over a company radio channel for everyone to hear. So one white supervisor attempted to snare an employee with a noose, and another white supervisor told an African-American employee that for Halloween, he didn't have to dress up, that the supervisor would just wear white and put a noose around his neck and they'd walk down the street together. And then a white employee bragged that his ancestors owned slaves. He didn't see anything wrong with it. And then another employee said that all Black people walk funny because they're used to carrying bags of cotton on their shoulders. So out of the 420,000, 225 went to the gentleman that was threatened with the snare and threatened with the news, excuse me. And the other 195,000 was distributed between 6 other African-American employees. And here's a sexual harassment.
Karen,
Yes.
could I ask a question?
You bet.
If a work environment has, I don't know how to say this, pin-up posters and so forth, can that not be a environment that can be considered harassment?
Like inappropriate posters, you mean?
Yes,
Absolutely. Yes, that can be considered as well. Yes.
So the environment has to be the pictures, posters, whatever. It's not just a verbal, but it's also the visual.
Yes.
Around.
And we're going to talk about that too.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. You're leading me right into it. So this last one, Deseret Truss and Buttram Construction, they're paying $70,000 for sexual harassment. And all of this was a female employee said that the owner of the company repeatedly asked her for sexual advances, which she refused, and then they fired her. So she wasn't there for a long time, but continued to be asked out for sexual favors. And she said no, and she was awarded $70,000. So I just use these examples because I think they're a little close to home and they're recent, and to show you that small companies can be charged as well, and it can be devastating to a company. So specific forms of harassment. Most harassment claims involve claims of hostile work environment or environmental harassment, which includes unwelcome behavior. So when we talk about unwelcome, something that might be funny to you might not be funny to me, or vice versa. So we have to remember, just because somebody laughs at a joke or they go along with it doesn't necessarily mean that they're comfortable with it. How severe or pervasive is it? So how severe, we might have different ideas of what severe are too. So we have to consider that. And then how pervasive, how widespread is it? How often is it happening? And is it offensive to the reasonable man or woman? I personally love this one because I deal with a lot of complaints that maybe aren't too reasonable. Maybe somebody's super sensitive. I had one just today where somebody complained. They said they were being sexually harassed because somebody asked them if they had a girlfriend. That's not sexual harassment at all. And it alters the working conditions to create an abusive working environment. And remember, it can be created by anyone in the workplace. And then there's quid pro quo. Everybody's heard of quid pro quo, this for that. It occurs between a supervisor and an employee, and it's when a supervisor takes an adverse action like demotion, termination, or failure to promote someone because somebody doesn't go along with their requests. So who can commit harassment? Supervisors obviously can. We all know that. Also subordinates. I've had cases where a subordinate was harassing their supervisor as well. Coworkers, of course, can harass each other. And then clients and customers. I don't know if you've thought of this, but clients and customers, and it happens more than we'd like to know. So we have to protect our employees from this as well. And same sex. So who can experience harassment? There's the direct targets of harassment, and then there's bystanders and witnesses to harassment. An example of this might be somebody that's hearing their coworker talk about their sexual escapades on the phone with somebody, or talking to another coworker that's very inappropriate. So that would be a bystander. So Dave, here's the part you were talking about. So examples of risky behavior in the workplace. There's verbal, visual, and physical. So here's some examples of each of those. So verbal, unwanted propositions. And when I say this, if somebody were to ask somebody out one time, that's not sexual harassment. If they don't take no for an answer and they continue and continue, then that's harassment. That's sexual harassment. Repeated requests for dates, that's the next one. Sexual jokes, boasting of sexual conquests, excessive compliments. And oftentimes I'll have people say, well, I can't tell somebody they look nice. Absolutely, you can tell somebody they look nice. We all know that it's when you continue to tell somebody, oh, you look really nice, or oh, you look nice, and you're excessive about it, that's when it becomes a problem. Insulting sounds such as catcalls, spreading rumors that employees are sleeping together or like each other, and asking questions about sexual matters. Those are some examples of verbals. Any questions before I go to visual? So visual, displaying of sexually suggestive objects, cartoons, or poster, and that's what you'd mentioned, Dave. Leering, staring, or ogling at one's body or parts of one's body. Obscene gestures or facial expressions. Downloading pornography from the internet. Emailing or texting sexual jokes or images. This one is just, to me, is crazy. Being in human resources, I've had to deal with this. I actually had to deal with a manager who was on a group text and was answering some questions in the morning to his whole group, and decided it would be a good idea to take a nude picture of himself and send it to his new girlfriend. Well, he sent it to the group text of all of his coworkers instead of sending it to his girlfriend, of him coming out of the shower naked. Luckily, he just quit, so I didn't have to deal with it, but that's an example. And then physical, inappropriate touching, holding, grabbing, massaging, hugging, kissing, accidental bumping, leaning over someone, and invading personal space. Have I forgotten anything? Is there anything you guys would want to add to this to these lists? So legal decisions about whether an act constitutes harassment is really based on the totality of the circumstance. Again, how often did it occur? How severe is it? And was it unwelcome? When you look at this list, remember that. So what isn't sexual harassment? The stray remark, somebody says something off-colored one time, that's not harassment. And then there's the overly sensitive employee. I gave you an example of that. Just if somebody asks you if you're married or, you know, once you're working and somebody's trying to get to know you a little better, it's not harassment. And we all, there's overly sensitive people all over the place. And then a consensual relationship. But when you talk about a consensual relationship, I believe that every place of business should have a policy in place where a subordinate and a supervisor cannot date, because that just creates problems. Most of us are not on our very first original relationship that we ever had. Most relationships go south at one point, from your very first boyfriend or girlfriend. And so it's just not a good idea. So many lawsuits could be avoided if we have this policy in place. So the employer may be liable for harassment damages even if the victim never complained to the company. That one sometimes surprises people. Both the victim and harasser are coworkers, and they're the same sex, like we talked about. So what defenses does the employer have? To establish a policy, you have to have a good policy and follow it. Make sure that all employees are aware of the policy and how it works. Establish a great open door policy. So there's a way to take a complaint. If their supervisor's harassing them, who can they take that complaint to? Promptly and effectively address complaints of harassment and provide training for supervisors and employees. So damage awards can be greatly reduced if an employer can show that they're following these guidelines. The legal system provides affirmative defense and a potential reduction of penalties if you can show that you're doing all of these things within your company. So how to respond to a complaint. This is crucial that everyone understand this. So what should you do if an employee reports an issue of potential harassment and asks you not to tell anyone? Remember, no complaint is unofficial. You cannot, or unofficial. You cannot promise complete confidentiality or that you won't report it. You are obligated to report and respond to any report of potential harassment. I always think of tag your it. So if somebody brings something to you and they say, well, I don't want it to be reported, I let them know that I'm happy that they brought this to my attention. It's important that we have a place that everybody can come to work and feel comfortable. And I'm going to take their complaint seriously. And I will keep it confidential only in so much as on a need to know basis is the only way that I will share it. But I do have to do an investigation. So taking the complaint seriously, why is that important? You know, the way that which a complainant perceives how they're being treated when they have a complaint is crucial. If they feel like they're met with insensitivity or skepticism, it can be huge. Then they'll find another avenue to take their complaint, which leads to lawsuits. So it's really important that we take it seriously and that we are sensitive and listen to it. Listen to their complaint and take action. And then remember, reporting equals protection. What happens the moment someone reports harassment? They are automatically protected, and any employment action you take against that person could be construed as retaliation for reporting, even if you are unable to substantiate the allegations. Retaliation is the #1 complaint that the EEOC gets because of this type of thing. So, and can somebody still be terminated if they've turned in a report of harassment by somebody? They can, you just have to be very, very, very careful and make sure that you have all of your ducks lined up. You don't ever want it to be seen as retaliatory. So in conclusion, some areas are protected by the law, but more importantly, it's about creating a professional and respectful workplace so people can do their best and your company in turn can perform at its best. I know we've covered a lot of information here, and so I did leave some time for questions. And my contact information is on this slide as well. If you have any questions or need to talk to somebody about HR, give me a call. I'd be happy to answer your question and give you some advice. So, what questions do you have?
Karen, in providing a policy and so forth, you folks help design those type of HR policies, correct?
I do. As part of our services, I do your entire employee handbook, and I make sure that you have a very solid harassment and anti-discrimination policy in that handbook.
Okay, so part of that, does that require a yearly training or a pre-employment training, or what typically does a policy like that entail?
So generally, you'd read the policy as part of your new hire orientation. That's the beginning. And then most of my clients, we do annual training for supervisors and then annual training also for employees.
And how long does that type of training, is there a certain time required, or is it just to cover certain material?
Well, in the state of Utah, there's not any legal requirements. I know that California has a legal requirement that it be taught, every 6 months. In the state of Utah, there's not, but I recommend with my clients, like I said, we do an annual training for everybody. So up front, we go through a new hire orientation, make sure they understand the policy, they understand where to report if they have an issue, the open door line, how that works. And then we also do the annual training. And it's different for every client.
Because many of our members have employees who are out in the field and so forth. So to bring them in to a company meeting presents some challenges. Could they do something online and document that they've viewed that training, that type of thing, so that they could be in compliance with the policy?
Absolutely. Yes, we can do online training very easily. There's also, we have access to different online training too that wouldn't be in this format, but would be an interactive where you're going along and answering questions as you go.
Okay. And they take 15, 20, 30 minutes, just to give people an idea?
For employees, it's generally about 45 minutes.
Okay.
And the other thing is, if we have issues where I feel like, culture is at risk, then we'll do it more than just the annual training. We'll do it as needed as well.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question that they'd like to ask?
I love questions. Come on.
Well, Karen, there's your contact information. As you mentioned, this is an opportunity for people, if they have some specific questions, you would interface with them through email or a phone call. And as I mentioned in the introduction in the chat room, that BBSI is a new member of our association, and they're a great resource for companies, because you might not have a full-time person being in human resources, or you have some questions to confirm your thoughts or whatever. Karen is available, and we appreciate very much, Karen, you sharing your knowledge and and expertise in this. Let's see. Okay. Oh, we have one question here from Doug. It seems like we have talked about employee rights. Is there anything we need to know about employer rights?
I like that. That's a great question. So employer rights, really it's having that that policy in place and the processes in place, and that protects your rights. That's like one of the things I think about is, the reasonable man or woman. I think of that as employer rights, that we don't have to get caught up in things that are not truly inappropriate or harassment. But the biggest, I'd say, the rights that we have as employers is really to have that good foundation and to have that policy in place and to make sure that we're following it. We have good avenues for reporting sexual harassment, discrimination, and then investigating it, and that protects us.
And in fact, I've heard if what's not written in policy maybe is better, but that really isn't a smart way to go. It's better to have the policy and stick to that policy than have something that's no policy at all.
Absolutely. I can't even count the number of times I've been in unemployment hearings, even for an unemployment hearing, and the judge will say, well, I want to see the policy. And some of the requests I've had to see the policy, show me the policy where this employee needed, or this employee knew that they needed to show up every day and what time. Show me the policy where, this employee knew that they couldn't have this type of behavior. So policies are critical to have, and that does protect us as employers.
Very good. So policy doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't need to encompass everything, just things that owner feels like, and with consulting someone that has that experience, what they feel they should cover. There's some basics, of course, but it's not like it has to be a huge book that you have that becomes more dusty. You want it to be something that is used. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. I like to reduce the books to have the important things that need to be included. For instance, I have a lot of clients that maybe they have, trucks that they have employees out in, and they don't want people smoking in the trucks, or they go to see a customer and they shouldn't be smoking, on the customer's property, or cell phone policies really protect employers. If you have employees that are driving, shouldn't be on your cell phone while you're driving. And having that policy, you can't be texting, just policies and really that fit that business. So
very good. All right, thank you. Just a second. Does your business help guide the employer in the harassment cases?
yes, we do. That's why I was just talking about, I do that all the time. I help my clients with any type of harassment issues.
Okay.
I don't know if that answered the question, but yes, I'm very involved. I'm like your human resources leader.
Well, very good. Thank you very much for your excellent training. It's something that we probably don't do as much as we should in a company, especially in the trades as we are. We're kind of more rough and tumble, but we need to have that type of thing. So Karen, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And thank you everybody who's on the call. This is, like I said, going to be recorded so that your business partners or others can listen to it at another time, watch it. You do receive credit for this, a CE credit. So I've got everybody's name that's here today and their information, so we appreciate it. So thank you very much, Karen.